I'm Selena Cruz. I'm 33 years old, standing on the sun warmed stone driveway of my late grandfather's estate in Santa Fe, New Mexico, once again surrounded by relatives who speak to me like I'm the housemaid instead of one of their own. It's the annual Cruz Family Inheritance Conference, an event that used to be about unity when my grandfather, Manuel Cruz, was alive. Now, it's a glossy parade of designer suits, luxury SUVs, champagne smiles, and fake kisses on the cheek. These days, it feels more like an audition for who can prove they deserve the biggest cut of our family's fortune. I glanced down at my outfit: pressed black slacks, a navy blouse, and a worn leather shoulder bag I've had for nearly a decade. No designer labels, no flashy accessories, just quiet confidence and utility. The exact kind of thing they hate. My cousin Layla steps out of her Tesla in a cream power suit and oversized sunglasses, waving at no one in particular. She's followed by Theo, dressed like he just came from a yacht club photo shoot. The whispers start before I even reach the steps. Is that still the same Honda she had last year? I swear she shops at clearance bins. It's almost cute. Maybe she's trying that whole minimalist thing. Poor by choice? I keep walking. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next? Let's just say I didn't come here empty-handed. Inside the house, everything feels the same, but also completely different. The grand Adobe-style estate hasn't changed since I was a teenager. Cool terracotta tiles, hand-carved wooden beams across the ceilings. The air smells like the same cedar chest where Grandpa kept his cigars. Except now there's no warmth in the room, just the cold hum of entitlement. I head toward the main living room where the others are already sipping champagne. Aunt Gloria stands at the center like a hostess on a talk show, draped in a deep red silk dress and dripping in diamonds. She greets me with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "Selena," she says in the same tone one might use when addressing a barista who spelled her name wrong. "How lovely of you to join us." I nod, not bothering to fake a smile. "Wouldn't miss it." "Good," she says smoothly. "We'll be reviewing this year's financial standings, portfolio updates, and voting on the estate's redevelopment proposal." Redevelopment proposal? She doesn't elaborate, just turns away before I can ask. My stomach twists. I find a seat near the back beside my cousin Naomi, the only person in this family who's ever treated me like I belonged. She leans over and whispers, "They've been planning something big. Gloria's got architects and lawyers coming in tomorrow." My throat tightens. I glance around the room and see the smug glances, the knowing chuckles, the glint of dismissiveness in every perfectly arched eyebrow. They still think I'm nothing. And that's exactly what I want them to think, for now. Because what they don't know is this: I've built something, silently, deliberately. While they were laughing at my beat-up car and my small apartment, I was acquiring deeds, stacking equity, and building a network they couldn't see. And the folder in my bag? It's not filled with excuses. It's filled with ownership. I was 11 when the accident happened. One moment, I was in the back seat of my parents' SUV, returning from a camping trip in Taos. The next thing I remember is waking up in a sterile white hospital room with Naomi sitting beside me, clutching a stuffed bear and trying not to cry. They told me my parents were gone. A tire had blown. The guardrail gave way. It was instant. The funeral was quiet. I barely understood what was happening. Everyone talked over me, who would take me, how to divide what little my parents left behind. No one asked what I wanted. Except him. Grandpa Manuel walked into that room 2 days later, knee creaking from a hiking injury he never fully recovered from, and said one sentence that changed my life. "She's coming home with me." Home, as it turned out, was his sun-bleached estate on the outskirts of Santa Fe. Not flashy, but full of stories. He didn't believe in nannies or private chefs. He cooked breakfast himself every morning, usually something with eggs and hot green chile, and sat with me at the kitchen table, newspaper spread open, coffee steaming in front of him, and a pen tucked behind his ear. At first, I barely spoke. I just watched him read, underline articles, and make notes in the margins of property listings. One morning, he slid a copy of the Santa Fe New Mexican in front of me and said, "Pick a property, any listing. Then tell me why it's undervalued." I blinked at him. "What?" You heard me, kid. Start thinking like someone who builds things, not just buys them. That was how it began. Every Saturday morning, we played the same game. He taught me how to look at trends, zoning changes, land potential, floodplain maps, infrastructure plans. While other girls my age were watching cartoons, I was memorizing how to calculate cost per square foot and cross-checking housing permits. He was a quiet man, but his beliefs were loud. Wealth that demands attention is usually insecure. He told me once while walking the northern fence line of the property. The loudest money is often the weakest. Real wealth moves like the roots of a tree, silent, strong, and deep. While the rest of the family chased press features and posed in luxury magazines, Grandpa was donating to small-town libraries under pseudonyms. He paid off hospital bills anonymously for neighbors. He believed wealth wasn't for showing, it was for shielding, for building, for planting seeds others couldn't see yet. When I was 16, he gave me a dusty, leather-bound notebook with gold corners. "Your first ledger," he said. The first page had only a quote. "A quiet mind builds empires." Underneath it, in his own handwriting, "Don't let them turn you into one of them. Build slow, build smart, then decide if they deserve to know." That notebook became my compass. When I graduated high school, he gave me a small starter investment. Nothing wild, just a few $1,000s. But what I learned from him had more value than any trust fund. It taught me patience, strategy, resilience. Then, during my sophomore year of college, he had a stroke. It was sudden, unforgiving. The man who had taught me everything lay in a hospital bed for 3 days before passing with my hand in his. At the reading of his will, my cousins received trust payments and stocks. Gloria received managing control of the Cruz family assets. I received 2 things: that same estate we were sitting in now, and a sealed envelope with a note that read, "Finish what we started, and remember, quiet roots." No one knew it then, but that moment was when everything began. The seed was planted, and today, it's ready to grow through concrete. Dinner that evening was exactly what I expected. Sterile elegance, polite insults wrapped in velvet tones, and a table long enough to seat a minor royal court. Naomi and I were the last to arrive, which only gave them time to prime their smirks. We were seated at the far end, near the server's entrance, while Aunt Gloria held court in the center, flanked by Gavin and Layla, both decked out in designer formal wear as if they were attending a film premiere instead of a family meeting. The walls flickered with golden light from iron sconces, but nothing in the room felt warm. The first toast came swiftly. "To legacy," Gloria announced, raising her crystal glass. "And to moving forward with vision." Everyone echoed her words with glass clinks and fake smiles. I merely lifted my water. Between bites of herb-crusted lamb and truffle risotto, the conversation turned to money, as it always did. Layla had just returned from a month in the Maldives. A wellness retreat, you wouldn't understand, Selena. And Theo was deep in a monologue about how hard it was to find a yacht captain who also understood privacy clauses. Then came the moment I'd been bracing for. "So, Selena," Gavin said loudly, his voice echoing off the domed ceiling. "Are you still consulting? Or is it more of a passion project these days?" The way he said consulting made it sound like a euphemism for folding sweaters at a discount store. "Yes," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Still working with financial strategy clients." He chuckled. "Do they pay you in exposure or gratitude?" Laughter rippled down the table. Even some of the spouses I barely knew joined in, clearly taking their cues from the room's hierarchy. I smiled softly. "Fortunately in dollars. Though I'm sure exposure pays well too. How's your influencer deal going, Gavin?" The chuckle caught in his throat. Aunt Gloria jumped in, her voice soaked in faux concern. "We've always said you had such a strong spirit, Selena. So independent. But you know, dear, there's no shame in leaning on family when you need to." I looked up. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Are you offering me a loan?" I asked coolly. "Oh, don't be defensive," she said, waving a hand. "We were just talking earlier about starting a family support initiative, something to help those of us who may have fallen behind financially, especially those who didn't inherit the business sense." I heard it then, the phrase "fallen behind," as if I'd tripped while trying to keep up with them. as if this was a race, and I was the struggling one panting at the back of the pack. The pity in her voice was calculated. It wasn't concern, it was a performance for the others at the table. I appreciate the thought, I said, placing my fork down, but I've always found my own footing just fine. Theo leaned in from across the table, grinning. Sure, but imagine what you could do with a little help. A wardrobe upgrade, maybe even a better car. That Honda outside, it's still ticking? It's reliable, I said. It's embarrassing, Layla muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Naomi reached under the table and gave my hand a quick squeeze. Her subtle way of saying, stay calm. But she didn't need to worry. I was calm. I was always calm right before the play. After dinner, the conversation turned to the estate, Grandpa's estate, and Aunt Gloria finally laid her cards on the table. The time has come to transform this house into something more productive, she said, standing with her glass. Developers from Andalex Properties are submitting a proposal. They're offering an outstanding package for the land. My head snapped up. Andalex? That was a luxury resort builder. Known for turning old ranches into multi-million-dollar retreats with infinity pools and no soul. This isn't just property, I said quietly. Gloria gave me a slow blink. It's 5 acres of underutilized land, Selena. It's our family's history. No, she replied. It was Manuel's history. And now it's time we bring the crew's name into the present. The vote was set for Sunday, 2 days, and judging by the nods around the room, she already had her numbers. I left early, claiming a headache, and stepped outside into the cool desert air. The stars above the Santa Fe sky were brilliant, unbothered by wealth or status. I stood on the back porch, staring out over the brush and the distant silhouette of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. They were going to erase everything he stood for, unless I stopped them. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my grandfather's old study, surrounded by folders, notebooks, and a flickering desk lamp that hummed softly in the silence. The same lamp he used to read property forecasts and draft offers on unlisted parcels of land no one else had spotted yet. His presence lingered in this room like the scent of cedar and dry ink, and tonight I needed him more than ever. When he passed, I didn't inherit control of the Cruz family trust. That had gone to Aunt Gloria, the businesswoman. What I inherited was far quieter, access to his personal files, his real estate logs, and most importantly, his network. Mr. Pierce, Grandpa's longtime attorney, had taken one look at me during the will reading and said, "If you're anything like him, you'll want to work quietly. Call me when you're ready to build." I waited a year. Then, using the modest trust distribution I received and my savings from years of living frugally, I bought my first property, a duplex on the edge of Albuquerque, overlooked by everyone else because the crime stats seemed too high and the roof needed repairs. I lived in one unit, rented the other, and turned a 40% profit in 18 months. I never stopped after that. I used Shell LLCs, Pierce's specialty, to shield my name from public records. I invested in overlooked corners of New Mexico, Arizona, and West Texas, snapping up undervalued residential units, slowly upgrading them, keeping tenants happy, and reinvesting every dime. By age 30, I owned 9 residential properties, 3 commercial strips, and had equity in a small industrial warehouse near El Paso that was now tripling in value after a tech startup moved into the district. But the crown jewel? The apartment complex in Santa Fe? The one with the high-end lobby, keycard elevators, rooftop patio, and a curated tenant list. The same complex where Gavin, Layla, and Theo had just moved into last year, bragging at dinner about how they skipped the waiting list because of the Cruz name. They had no idea. No idea the small rent increases that annoyed them were funding new elevators and solar panels. No idea the stingy new guest policy was mine. No idea their morning gripes about construction noise were thanks to me personally approving lobby upgrades. And now, thanks to a quiet acquisition I finalized 3 weeks ago, I had just closed on a separate 12% stake in Cruz Development Holdings, enough to give me voting leverage within the family trust. I unfolded the last document in my folder, an offer letter drafted under the name Manuel Legacy Trust, structured to purchase the estate from the family before Aunt Gloria's deal with Andalex could go through. Everything was ready. Still, part of me hesitated. Why hadn't I revealed all this sooner? Why let them mock me year after year? Because Grandpa had taught me the value of strategic silence. When you build in the dark, no one can block your foundation, he used to say. But now, the time for quiet roots was over. Now it was time to rise. I stood by the study window just as dawn began to brush the horizon in soft gold. The estate's silhouette looked almost fragile in that light, as if it were already fading into memory. But I wouldn't let that happen. Tomorrow they'd come with contracts, numbers, and bulldozers in their eyes. But I would be ready, with numbers of my own, and a deed that would rewrite the future. Saturday morning unfolded like a perfectly staged performance, every detail curated for optics, every conversation sharpened like cutlery. Breakfast was served on the rear patio, overlooking the sprawling hills that wrapped around the Cruz estate like old protective arms. The view had always comforted me as a child, but now, it felt like a curtain drawn over something precious, something about to be stolen. Naomi joined me at the edge of the patio, quietly sipping her coffee. "They're warming up," she said. "You're the topic of conversation already." I didn't ask what they were saying. I didn't need to. Inside, Aunt Gloria had arranged the drawing room like a boardroom. Leather chairs in a half circle, glossy folders neatly placed at each seat, and a projector already glowing with the first slide of a redevelopment plan. The screen read, "Vision 2026, Cruz Estate Reimagined." The words made me sick. I took a seat near the end, where I could observe the room without being the center of attention. Just the way I preferred it. Until now. Aunt Gloria stood confidently at the front of the room, tapping the clicker in her manicured hand. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice sweetened with self-importance. "As you know, this property has been in the family for nearly 60 years, but it's time we consider what's next. This land, 5 acres of prime Santa Fe real estate, is underutilized. We have an offer from Andalex Properties, $36 million, closing within 60 days. Gavin let out a low whistle. "That's a hell of a number." "It is," Gloria nodded, smiling at him like a queen bestowing favor. "And with the sale, we could reinvest the returns into higher-yield development projects. Expand the Cruz brand." "What about Grandpa's wishes?" I asked quietly. All eyes turned to me. Some surprised I had spoken, others annoyed that I had. Gloria's expression barely changed. "Your grandfather built this estate when the market looked different, Selena. He couldn't have predicted the land's future value." I looked straight at her. "He also couldn't have predicted that his children would view his home as a disposable asset." That earned me a few sharp exhales, cousins shifting in their seats, a rustle of tension in the air. "I know you have sentimental attachments," she replied smoothly. "But feelings don't fund growth. This is business." "Then let's talk business," I said. "How many other buyers did you consult? What contingencies are in the offer? Who holds voting rights if this goes to a family decision?" She blinked once, then smiled. "Darling," she said, and I hated how she said it. "We're not going to pretend your little consulting gigs have prepared you for this scale of transaction. Let the adults manage the strategy." That comment hit deeper than I expected. But it was Gavin's voice that landed the real blow. "I mean, come on," he said, leaning forward with a smirk. "Selena still lives in that shoebox apartment near downtown, right? You really think she's qualified to weigh in here?" Layla chimed in, fake sympathetic. "Maybe we could just vote on the payout and give her a little bonus. You know, for being brave enough to speak up." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Naomi reached for my arm, but I shook my head. "I'll be fine," I whispered. Because this wasn't about pride anymore. This wasn't about bruised feelings. This was about watching my grandfather's legacy be stripped down, polished up, and sold to developers who would build infinity pools over the bones of our family's values. And worst of all, they were laughing while they did it. The rest of the morning was a blur of presentations, brochures, market projections. Real estate buzzwords tossed around like confetti. Elevated experiences, premium amenities, multi-use potential. I sat through every word in silence, hands folded, face calm. But inside, something hard and ancient was waking up in me. Not rage, resolve. Sunday morning came with a stillness that felt almost theatrical. The sky above Santa Fe was a sheet of unbroken blue, the kind of clarity that demanded honesty. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my guest room, once my childhood bedroom, buttoning the final clasp of a dark charcoal blazer. Understated, tailored, and quiet. The kind of armor my grandfather would have approved of. Around my neck, I fastened his old silver pin. Nothing flashy, but deeply personal. By the time I stepped into the drawing room, the rest of the family had already gathered. Today's session was about financial positioning. Each member of the Cruz family would present their annual investment summary, boasting of portfolio growth, new acquisitions, and strategic influence. In reality, it was a competition masked as tradition. Aunt Gloria stood at the head of the room, her expression as polished as ever. "Let's begin," she announced. "This year's order will be by portfolio value, descending." Of course. The first to speak was Theo, who bragged about his investments in an AI-adjacent crypto startup. "Early stage, high risk, but I'm not afraid to play aggressive," he said. Layla followed, flaunting her gains from flipping designer homes in Scottsdale, complete with drone footage. Gavin went next. "Real estate's in my blood," he began smugly, as if he had personally laid the foundation for every Cruz property in New Mexico. Added 3 new properties in Austin, all under market value. Working with a very exclusive agent. He glanced at me. Not everyone has access to that kind of network. Each presentation was followed by polite applause. Notes were taken. Compliments exchanged. This wasn't sharing. It was posturing. Then Gloria looked down at the final name on the list and hesitated. "Selena Cruz," she said, the words tasting like vinegar. "You're next." I stood carrying a single leather portfolio and walked to the front with slow, deliberate steps. For the first time all weekend, the room felt genuinely quiet. "I've prepared a short summary," I said calmly. "I'll begin with property holdings." I opened the folder and laid out a series of documents. Deeds, valuations, LLC ownership chains. One by one, I handed them to Naomi, who passed them along the row of family members. Murmurs began immediately. "I currently manage 14 properties across New Mexico, Arizona, and West Texas," I continued. 6 residential, 5 commercial, and 3 mixed-use developments, all under private holdings I began building 10 years ago. Aunt Gloria narrowed her eyes. "I don't see your name on any of these titles." I nodded. "That's by design." I stepped toward the projector and inserted a USB drive. The screen behind me lit up with a chart. Clear, color-coded, irrefutable. Asset growth, property maps, equity projections. "My total net worth as of last month's valuation," I said steadily, "is $68.4 million. You could hear a wine glass tremble on a side table. Gavin leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "That can't be real." "It is," I replied. "And it doesn't include the apartment complex you live in." His head snapped toward me. "You what?" "Yes," I said, letting the weight of it land. "The building you, Layla, and Theo moved into last year, it belongs to me. Through Horizon Vista, LLC. Layla blinked in disbelief. "You raised the rent?" "Correct," I said, "but still 12% below market average." "You're welcome." Theo muttered something under his breath, but Gloria stepped in, her tone icy. "You've gone to great lengths to keep this hidden. Why reveal it now?" I met her gaze without flinching. "Because I no longer have anything to prove, but I have something to protect." I turned back to the group. "This estate isn't just land, it's our foundation. And I won't let you destroy it for short-term gains. Which is why, as of this morning, ownership of this property has been transferred to the Manuel Legacy Trust, funded entirely by me." A hush fell over the room. Aunt Gloria's face was stone. "That's not possible," she said. "We still own the estate." "You did," I said, "until I made a private offer to the family trust and acquired it legally, through Pierce, Grandpa's attorney. As of 8:42 a.m. today, the deed was transferred. It's done." She reached for her phone. "I'll verify this." "Please do," I said. I turned to the rest of them. "I'm not evicting anyone. I'm not punishing anyone, but I am drawing a line. This legacy matters, and I will not let Grandpa's memory become a brochure. Naomi stood. I support this. 100%. I nodded, grateful beyond words. The silence that followed was one of stunned recalibration. And for the first time in my life, in this family's presence, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. The room was frozen. Not a fork clinked. Not a breath stirred. Aunt Gloria's hand hovered over her phone, her glossy nails trembling ever so slightly as she stared at the transfer document I'd printed and passed around. This is an ambush, Gavin muttered, as if blindsided by reality itself. I met his eyes. No, Gavin, this is due diligence, something you and your trust fund have never had to practice. His lips parted, but no sound came out. I turned away before he could find something petty to spit back. Theo was frowning at one of the legal documents in his hand, running his thumb down the signature line. This can't be real, he mumbled. We were supposed to sell to Andalex. The deal was done. No, I said calmly. The proposal was drafted. The deal was never executed, which gave me time. Layla, ever the actress, let out a theatrical sigh. You've been hiding this much wealth and still show up here in that awful car? I smiled without apology. Because wealth isn't my identity, it's my instrument. Unlike some of you, I don't need validation parked in a driveway. Aunt Gloria finally found her voice again, the venom coating each syllable. You manipulated the family, used private LLCs, concealed assets, bought your way into control. How is that honorable? I raised an eyebrow. Is it any less honorable than selling your father's home out from under the family for a quick payout? Or using your position to appoint your son to a six-figure role he's not qualified for? Careful, she hissed. No, I said, stepping closer, voice even. You be careful, because you've been abusing your role for years, hiding behind tradition and seniority. But let me make one thing very clear. Your authority ends now. Pierce entered the room at that moment, right on cue. In his calm, unwavering voice, he confirmed everything. The deed transfer to the Manuel Legacy Trust is fully executed and notarized. The estate is no longer under the Cruz family trust. Furthermore, Ms. Cruz has acquired, over the last 18 months, a silent stake of over 14% in Cruz Development Holdings through third-party channels. That gives her the ability to block any major trust-level decisions. He placed a thick legal folder on the table with a soft thud. She is, as of this morning, the largest individual stakeholder in the entire family enterprise. The silence was so heavy it seemed to buckle the air. Gavin looked pale. Layla looked furious. Theo just looked lost. And Aunt Gloria? Her composure cracked. Just a flicker, but I saw it. The weight of realizing she was no longer the most powerful voice in the room. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I stood tall. This house, I said slowly, will not become a resort. It will become the Manuel Cruz Institute, a nonprofit foundation for financial literacy, community reinvestment, and mentorship for underrepresented entrepreneurs. Exactly the kind of legacy Grandpa wanted to leave behind. Gloria opened her mouth, but I cut her off gently. And before you ask, no, none of the funding will come from the family trust. It's fully funded from my portfolio, so no one can vote it away. Naomi placed a hand on my arm. I didn't even have to look. I knew her eyes were shining. You used to laugh at my choices, I told the room. The car, the clothes, the quietness. You assumed poverty where there was purpose. You mistook discipline for desperation. I took a breath. And now you live in buildings I own. You walk past policies I wrote. You sleep under roofs I renovated. And you mock the very hand that held those keys. That was the moment the truth settled over the room like a second sky. Heavy, inescapable. I had arrived, not with noise, but with clarity. Not to destroy, but to correct. For the first time in years, they saw me not as the quiet cousin or the poor relation, but as something they had no word for. Powerful. And not because I had taken control, but because I had earned it. The meeting ended not with applause, but with silence. Not the kind of silence that follows a speech, the kind that follows an earthquake. Cousins shuffled out of the room, stunned and unsteady, their expensive loafers echoing against the stone floor. A few tried to recover. Layla muttered something about legal loopholes. Gavin mumbled that I'd ambushed the family. Theo didn't even make eye contact. But no one said I was wrong. Aunt Gloria was the last to leave, walking slowly, as if the weight of the empty power she now carried had suddenly become real. She paused by the door, turned to me and said, "Your grandfather would be ashamed of what you just did." I held her gaze, unflinching. "No," I said quietly. "He would be ashamed of what you tried to do." She left without another word. The days that followed were strange. Phone calls came in from family members I hadn't heard from in years. Some apologetic, some calculating, some pretending to be curious when all they really wanted was to know what came next. Gavin texted me a long-winded half-apology that somehow managed to include a business pitch. Layla posted a cryptic message on social media about betrayal and manipulation, followed 2 days later by photos of her in Bali, smiling beside a waterfall like nothing had happened. Theo sent a voice memo starting with, "I guess I underestimated you." He deleted it before finishing. I didn't respond to any of them. But Naomi? She came over the next evening. No appointment, no agenda. Just a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. We sat on the back porch where Grandpa used to read to us in the summers, watching the golden light spill across the hills. She clinked her glass against mine and said simply, "You did it." "No," I said. "I just did what should have been done years ago." She looked at me. "Do you feel different?" I considered it. I feel like I stopped waiting for them to see me. The Manuel Cruz Institute launched 6 months later. The estate was transformed, restored, not gutted. The study became a scholarship library. The East Wing was converted into a community training center. Financial literacy workshops, real estate mentorships, and small business grants all ran from the home they once tried to erase. The media picked it up, not because I courted attention, because the story mattered. Orphaned granddaughter turns family estate into financial empowerment hub. It wasn't about revenge. It was about realignment. Every so often, I'd see Aunt Gloria or one of my cousins at local events. They were polite now, measured. Some had begun donating to the Institute. Some came only for the photo ops. I let them, because the truth was, after everything, I no longer needed them to change. I had changed. The validation I used to crave from them had been replaced by something quieter, but infinitely stronger. Clarity and freedom. I still live in my modest downtown apartment. I still drive my 10-year-old Honda. Not because I have to, because I choose to. I wear my grandfather's pin to every board meeting and mentorship luncheon. And every time I walk through the old halls of this house, now humming with purpose, not ego, I remember his words. Quiet roots grow deep. And now, they bloom. Have you ever been underestimated? Labeled as less than by the people who were supposed to know you best? Maybe you're still building in silence, planting those roots. Or maybe you're just waiting for the moment to rise. If this story speaks to your journey, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's hear your voice. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for more stories like this, where justice comes slow, but it never comes small. Because sometimes the most powerful way to answer those who doubt you is to let them live inside the empire they thought you'd never build.